Okay, for people joining this live stream, this is one of our continuing series of meetings about language completeness and consistency for Wolfram language. We appear to have a modest collection of easy topics today, but it often starts looking that way and doesn't end that way. Okay.
So
what is this?
This one is hopefully an easy. We discussed this one last time, and you approved it under the name Arguments Options List. And before we merged it, Jose had the suggestion that maybe we should just call it Argument Options, because normally, as it says there, when we call things, list.
Arguments Options
List. It's still called Arguments Options List, because that was the name from the last meeting.
It's not there.
It should be.
S at the end of arguments.
Okay. Tries to separate arguments into positional.
Oh, maybe we haven't updated the verbiage like we should do, right? But it's the thing that returns it returns a pair of positional arguments and options.
I see. So, but it does so by doing what? So it has this thing has to not evaluate.
Correct.
Or does it not evaluate itself?
What do you mean, does it not evaluate itself?
This thing that you give it, if I put, find shortest tour or something, and it's got something in there, that's going to evaluate it before this function even sees it.
No, because this function is hold first. Otherwise, it would be completely useless.
Okay, fine.
Just like any sort of testing function.
Right.
Okay.
The point is that the implementation of that function is the thing that's probably calling arguments options list. And so its arguments will presumably have evaluated already unless that function itself has some kind of hold attribute.
Right.
Maybe
but
that's what you were thinking.
But this is going to be called, okay, I agree with you, it should be called arguments options.
Okay.
But this thing is going to be called not during the evaluation of F, but outside of F.
It's going to be called by the, basically by the down values of F.
How?
With condition.
Because that's how the author of F implemented F.
Yes.
There's no magic that causes this function to evaluate on arbitrary functions.
No, I understand, but what does the code look like? So it says F of X triple blank. Then what?
Slash semi, arguments options. Well, I guess if, this is a,
That's not right. What you want to do.
Yeah, you want to call it on the right-hand side.
Yeah, you'll want to call it on the right-hand side, right? Gets, and so then your first.
Execute it like that.
So
yes.
What I would do is to put a colon equal dollar failed, and then the condition. And this is the last down value. That's
for test arguments, which gives you the Boolean of whether it passed the test or not. This is for a slightly different where you will, right? There's an example in the application section of how you might use it.
Right, I confused it with the other one. Yeah.
Oh, gosh. This is not the most beautiful workflow.
It's how things have been implemented for.
I know.
Yeah.
We should figure out how to do it better.
Well,
All right, so the main
such
issue here-
such functions may I think that its more useful cousin is the test arguments version, which just returns true or false, and then you put your last down then the last down value is like Jose suggested, and that way it issues sort of messages for all the wrong number of arguments and invalid options,
Does
etc.
anybody know
etc.
how this relates to Christopher's confirm enclose framework?
Oh, I mean, it's in the same. Well, Christopher should be here with us. If he's not, then we'll probably want to skip the next item.
So
But
can we find him? He doesn't seem to be on this list. So can somebody try to find him?
Yeah.
I mean, they're sort of playing around. I mean, this is automating the process of testing arguments, argument counts, and when you have ambiguities between what are arguments and what are options.
What would you really like it to do? I mean, so a typical pattern here that we would do is to say, f of x triple blank, opts colon options pattern of blah, right? Colon equals blah.
I would, well, except possibly as an outermost wrapper, right? I would never write that.
Why?
Because I don't know that those options are actually valid options to F. I just know that they have the form of options.
Well, maybe we should try and clean this up. I mean, does options pattern take information about F as part of its?
Kind of, sort of, but not really. So options pattern takes information from F, but only when you are retrieving option values, not in the pattern matching bits.
No, somebody is noting on our live stream that you, Itai, are very loud.
Okay, well, I'll see if I can convince Zoom to adjust the input level.
Would it make sense to have an arguments pattern similar to options pattern that took,
Well, that's interesting.
sort of the same sorts of arguments as arguments options? And
So in other words, the way this would then look is args colon arguments pattern, opts colon options pattern.
Well,
I mean, I was actually
no.
thinking that arguments pattern would sort of include the options pattern and hook into option value and that sort of thing.
Right, but of course, then the issue is, but of course, then you don't get any of the benefits of, test arguments because, not only, I'm saying either of these idioms.
No, you do if things. So the point is, if it's literally just args colon argument options pattern, where no matter what the user so that's going to match a sequence, but args becomes bound to the separated list that you would get from arguments options list or whatever we called that. If you're following me.
Yeah, I'm following you, but
so
I don't like it.
then you get everything for free.
No, you don't, because
and the catch there are two things that you lose. One is what was the original sequence and list structure of what was passed in, and the other is I don't know how horrifying the implementation of this pattern matching is.
Well, but also,
no. You also lose something very important, is because you also lose all the messaging that you get from the current guys because
it doesn't match.
Because it doesn't match, so it doesn't match. You won't get a message every time it doesn't match. That would be crazy.
And also, you don't get the destructuring from the pattern matching. Right? Pattern matching, I mean, this is just like, you might as well just plus a Fortran style blob in here. You don't get all the stuff to do with, let's say your function was f of, x blank, y blank, blah, 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 blah. You don't get any of that stuff. Right, so what problem are we trying to solve? Let's enumerate what problems are we trying to solve?
Well, we're trying to solve the problem of how to. Well,
Wait,
okay.
I'm Christopher.
Right. We're trying to solve the problem. I mean, this is the less compelling of the two functions. I'll grant you that. But these these two functions collectively do two things. They issue the appropriate messages for invalid arguments and options, of which there are probably 17 or 20 different ones. And this automates issuing the correct message for you. And they, sort of arguments options list, as opposed to what did we end up calling the other one? Is it test arguments?
Check arguments.
Check arguments. This one, rather than returning true, false, are these valid, returns a list which, if you want to sort of, process all the options and arguments, and especially if you want to do them held, because it supports, you giving it a head other than list, so it can return a held thing. You sort of know up front what are your options and what are your options, and you can write based on that. I mean, that is a much rarer use, even internally, idiom than the just testing and issuing the correct messages. So this is step one. I mean, we might want a sort of define function that sort of takes some
I
info.
think we shouldn't have this discussion without Christopher, because he's already worked on a bunch of. I mean, this whole enclosed confirm framework is not precisely relevant to this, but is closely related. I mean, clearly what we need to do here is there is some idiom that will be what the typical well-armored function definition will look like. And we would like to get the advantage of both our, that's what we were trying to do with forms like this, is get the advantage of all the destructuring stuff. And, you're concerned about how we do the fall through. I mean, for example, let's imagine that we had a completely different construct that was some kind of let's just imagine it was something like this. It's not a good name, but something like this, which essentially always matches, okay? But which is responsible for generating messages in certain cases. Do you get what I'm saying?
Possibly.
Because that's what you're talking about here.
I mean, this function is not purely for that. I mean, people do write things like, right, especially when there's potential ambiguity between options and arguments. That they use this to easily separate the arguments and the options, and then they have internally either a second function or a switch based on the length of the arguments.
Let's try to avoid having to have a switch.
I think we have here two fundamental different paradigms. People who would start by checking everything, and then once they checked everything is okay, they go and do the computation. And others, which I think is more common, that will do the computation in general, and only if no other than value applied, then they will check the number of arguments and emit errors. Right. And that's why we have these two functions. One is useful in each situation.
Exactly.
Which functions are we talking about? Argument?
Argument options and check arguments. So argument options is basically the same as check arguments, only it returns true false. And that's for, you write all the down values, write all the patterns you actually care about, and then you have an f x triple blank, slash semi false with the, check arguments to issue the correct message because you made it to the fall through bad down value. And that's a very common idiom. And the fact that we haven't exposed to our users the function that we all use to do
Which
that.
function are we talking about now?
Well,
check arguments.
Yes, I think that the other one is more important than this one.
Right, and we went over all of this last time, which is why I'm a bit frustrated.
Okay, look, Christopher should have been here. Apparently, he was added to the wrong week's meeting. I think he'd be a very relevant person to talk about this stuff and to see how it relates to the confirm and close stuff. Let's not do this again this time. What we agreed this time is arguments options should be the name, and we will go back again and look at this again.
Okay.
But let's not do it right now. And value queue.
That is why Christopher should have been added. So,
Great.
Because last time
the wrong week.
Okay.
Terrific. Okay, let's go on then to storage location. Okay, draft ref page. So how does this relate to the external storage stuff?
It has nothing to do with external storage stuff.
Well, should it have nothing to do with external storage? Why can't I specify external storage and external storage location in, external storage is...
Well, okay, fine. It has something to do with it in the sense of, to the extent that you can store these things in an external storage thing.
Okay,
sure.
So if I have, what is it called? External storage object? What is it called?
I don't know. I'm not sufficient expert on these things.
New in 12.1. Okay. So that was the external storage object is about to be for Amazon S3 and things like that. Okay.
Right. So to the extent it makes sense to the extent that it makes sense to store any of these objects in an external storage, sure, that could be supported. But it has nothing to do with external storage as such. Right.
Okay, so storage location is an option. Okay. Is it also an option for the neural net system and for, other things that are, what else is it an option for?
At the moment, it doesn't exist, right? It's only in video generator, but then it could be propagated to appropriate functions.
Right.
Yes.
And in the discussion section, there's a list of, some obvious candidates that would want to take this thing. So
let me ask you a question. I'm going to show you something.
Okay.
I'm looking up something here. This is the GPT-2 transformer network. Okay. This might seem irrelevant, but it isn't. Why is this fuzzy? I don't understand. Oh, for goodness sake. What is going on here? Why isn't this in the CDN? Well, maybe I'm not going to be able to show you this. This seems to have something. No, actually, this isn't what I did, actually. Never mind. But that should be in the CDN. Okay. Unable to store data in notebook. Mm-hmm. What is that? What does that mean, and why is it there? And what, this, when did it get added as a big red thing?
Probably in 12.1 or maybe 12.1.1.
I think it must be 12.1.1 because I haven't seen it before.
And that happens, well, it's possible that they decided to just declare it as something that can't, but if they're using the default behavior, that means the expression is sufficiently large that we don't want to embed it in the notebook.
What is the maximum size constraint?
It's somewhere in the couple of 100 megabytes range. I think we turned it into a system option if people want to shoot themselves in the foot, but given that people also crash their front ends by trying to embed objects which were too big, that's basically why we put an upper limit on what you can embed.
I'm sorry. What is the upper limit? By the way, people are also still complaining that you're too loud, Itai.
Oh, wrong kernel.
This seems to be 150 megabytes, the sequence predict thing.
Okay, so why is that not being stored?
Because
so what is the name of the upper limit?
Do system options of typeset options.
That's a very weird place for it to go.
Embed button byte count limit. So that looks like 128 megabytes to me.
Okay. Did we ever go over this? Because this looks really goofy to me. I mean, this is like the most important thing here. Unable to store. It's not that important. It's not important unless you try and use it. It shouldn't be a big red error condition, should it?
Well, I mean, it is an error condition. If you have things that you normally...
Yes, I know, but it shouldn't be red like that. It shouldn't be really jumping out on the page. This looks like an error. It's not an error. It's simply that we can't store it in the notebook. And by the way, it should have more text in there. I mean, in other words, this is not right.
Fine. Then all right, take it to user assistance. This was signed off by John. I don't take every
when
in the spring when we did this, and we don't take every single bug fix in by you. So. Okay, I've adjusted my mic level, so hopefully
that's much better. Well, I'm sending this to John since apparently I don't understand how this happened. It's wrong. It needs to be fixed. Okay. I mean, it just should not be bright red like that.
I don't know that I agree with that. I mean,
it shouldn't be bright red like that. It is not an error. It is not an error. It's what we've had for the last however many years. It is a new thing that you can pick up something like this and expect it to work.
No. This is the complete opposite of that, because these things, right? So, do something a bit smaller, right? So I don't know how you can make that somewhat smaller, but right, if you do a sparse array of well, that's too small because that's but sparse array
that might have a different behavior. If you quit, I'm not sure that box will store the information inside it. Why? I'm not sure.
Oh, that's interesting.
Well, that's wrong if that's the case, because then why doesn't it have a big red flag as well?
Presumably because Tali and company decided to implement their own behavior instead of just relying on automatic. Or maybe it's just something that's never interpretable. Right. But this is telling you this thing, which is sometimes interpretable, is completely
so as Ethan points out on
uninterpretable.
our live stream, we should have something which is a button here which says, you know, you can store as a local object, for example, or with one of these storage location things, right? That's what this should have, is the ability to have a storage location where you can say you can store it here or there.
Okay. Right. But if you do say sparse array, here, let me get into a current kernel, like, right. So if you do sparse array of, you know, compare sparse array of 1, 2, 3.
Look, listen.
Hey, let me finish.
Okay,
And
go
sparse
ahead.
and then sparse array of range of 10 to the 7th. Okay. And so that fine. Then try. Okay, and now do something like, I don't know, 10 to the 6 maybe.
This is a really a screw up. This should never have been allowed.
Stephen, will you please just do that? So I can show you that there are 3 states here.
A source array of what?
Try 10 to the 6. Right. So this is telling you the thing which you normally, when there's nothing there, it's interpretable.
I understand. Okay. So this is just wrong.
It is not wrong.
Yes, it's wrong. It should just say store now. And when you say store now, it should say you can't store it in the notebook. Where do you want to store it? What storage location would you like to pick? That's what it should do. Because this statement, data is not a notebook, that's the only statement you care about. Unable to store a notebook for reasons that we aren't even telling you isn't the right thing. This is the right thing to have there. Exactly this. And say store now. And why is there a 16 point? What is that weird parenthesis there? Look at that in that message. That should be fixed, but that's a minor bug. Okay, who's picking up these bugs? Is Devin picking up these bugs? Devin, are you taking notes, or do I need to take these notes?
I'm here. Yes, sorry, I was.
Did you get that
muted.
note or not?
Yeah, I screenshot it.
Okay. All right, so listen, the way this should work is it should simply say data in not a notebook, store now, and then it should have some message here that basically says you can't store this in the notebook because it exceeds this limit. So what storage location would you like to pick? Okay, and then it goes to the storage location where it's telling you what the possible places to store it are.
So one issue I could see for some functions like sparse array is that they don't really support an out of cur mode, right? So sparse array of a file is not a concept that.
Well, it isn't yet. It probably should be. Okay, not yet a concept, but it should be a concept. Am I making sense?
I don't know that I agree with that. The whole point of sparse array is efficient performance. A file-backed sparse array is just not
it
useful.
Doesn't exist yet because the whole point is it's not in the notebook, so it has to auto import when you're using it. See what I'm saying? The only issue is this is not being stored.
But that's a different issue. If you want to solve that problem, you can go and solve that problem. But that is not.
But that's what storage location is doing for video.
No, it's not. It is not solving that problem.
Yes, it is. Video generator is auto-importing. That's what it's doing, or it's effectively auto-importing. It's using it. It happens to work out of core, so it doesn't need to import it. But conceptually, what it's doing is it's using an external storage location and effectively importing, even though it doesn't actually have to import.
I mean, it's not the storage location does this. Storage location just is the first argument to export, essentially, if we want to draw a parallel.
Yeah, exactly. Storage location is telling you where would you like to store this. The fact that there's a whole out-of-core infrastructure is sort of gravy on the cake. But, listen, look. That has nothing.
Okay, look, we've got one piece of functionality, which is this thing here, this video generator thing, is supposed to. So show us an example of where storage location will be used for video generator.
It would just be in this case, it's just an example with audio generator, but it would be exactly the same thing.
Okay, but what this is saying is, what this will look like in the notebook is presumably something like this.
No, it'll look like, first of all, it will look like an audio object, and its input form will be audio of, file of whatever, just like just like you could have typed in by hand.
I understand. It'll say something like this. So I'm telling you the same thing. This should be unified with this. There is no difference.
No.
This thing
is completely different. One is dealing with arbitrary expressions which are in memory, and the other one is dealing with
arbitrary expressions.
You are specifically generating a new object which could be stored in any of number locations.
Okay, which including in memory.
Right. I think we had discussed this
not
before,
necessarily.
that we wanted to switch.
Wait. Not necessarily in memory. There are things which don't support in memory.
Well, it says in memory here, storage location, arrow none.
Video, for instance, does not have an in-memory version. But we had discussed this in the past, that it would be nice for audio as well to be able to switch between local, remote, cloud, or in-memory modes. And video is not going to have in-memory case. But if we want to unify the UX for that, which we don't have, and this,
yes,
I think that's fine.
Which we should do. So let's go through what we should do. I mean, the fact is, all of these things, they're all large objects where, in the case of video, it is never going to be stored in the notebook, right? So that will be another case here for storage location. Is it's like a persistence location, and Roman, you should pipe up here. It's like a persistence location, which can persistence location include in the notebook?
No.
Okay, Roman, could Roman say something, please?
Persistence location always maps to one of these that are listed here, like local or cloud location, or it could be in the kernel.
Okay, so but can it be in the notebook? Yes.
Yes.
So why was the answer to that question no? Because the answer to the question is
because this is not a persistence location.
No, I understand. The answer to persistence location is it can be stored in the notebook, right?
Sort of.
There it is. Well, there's no sort of. What's the sort of about?
The sort of is it's right. It's going to be subject to the same limitations as those summary blobs, probably even worse.
No, I don't understand. What are you talking about? Are you talking about the limitations because we're setting an upper limit to the size, or what?
Well, yes, and because
all right, that's not relevant. So this here says we've got the possibility of having a persistence location which includes the notebook, right? Now, some of these things, these types of persistence locations are different from your proposed storage location, right?
Yes.
Right, because these are real, because storage location is for real files that users might want to find. They're not for arbitrary expressions.
Well, but the examples of storage locations include local objects and cloud objects. So I wonder whether we couldn't also just allow a persistent.
So the issue with that, I would say, for example, for video, you would not be able to have a storage location in a front-end session because it really needs a file. For local object, it is a file-backed local object. For a cloud object, it would be a file-backed cloud object. So it is really, as Itai said, something that requires a file to exist somewhere. And again, it applies to objects that are not files, but that are backed by files.
Well, I don't think that's true, right? I mean, speech synthesize. Well, right? I mean, it could conceivably work for URL download or something, right? I mean,
Indeed. Oh yes, sorry.
right. I mean,
right.
you because you are working on audio and video are concerned about the file-backed things, but this could apply equally to any thing that generates files.
Okay. Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So what's more relevant than persistence location is $Wolfram documents directory.
These things have to be unified. Sorry, they have to be unified. Persistence location also, what is its play with respect to the documents directory?
I don't think it.
No, I'm asking Roman. How does this? If I want to persist in the documents directory, how do I do it?
I mean, you could use a local object in any directory.
No, it says based on user home directory. So local to a computer.
Yeah, but local has the argument of a local object can be an absolute directory name.
No, I understand that, but I'm not asking that question. I'm saying, does this mean if I say persistence location to local, does that mean it's using the documents directory or something else?
No, it uses the $local base, which you can change. But
well, then how is that based on your home directory? I mean, first of all, I don't know what based means. I mean,
that's not a very good description, I must admit. And on the other hand, all of these have you can say local arrow $documentation directory. Then it would use that one as a base. That is explained further down on this page.
Well, default local base appears to be the default local base is something determined here. What's that relative? What is this $? What is the other one? The documents one, Itai, that you've just mentioned?
$Wolfram documents directory.
I have no idea what the relationship between these things is, or should be.
Well, there isn't one.
Then nor should there be, because one is in an invisible portion of the file system and is managed by us, and which is the first one, and the second one is just a place where we put things in a standard location for users to be able to find.
Right. So both of them, everything in persistence location is relevant to data not in notebooks store now. That's relevant. Any one of these places, we should be able to pull back the sparse array from a persistence location.
Well, yes, but I mean, what will not work is the file-backed things, as was explained earlier.
I'm sorry, what won't work for what?
Persistence locations are not guaranteed to be file-based, but there's no problem storing a sparse array in a persistent object anywhere.
Fine. But so then the correct behavior here is data not in notebooks, store now. Where do you want to store it? Blump. If it can't store in the notebook, you store it somewhere else. Then what would be put here, presumably, and I don't know exactly how this would work, and we need to think about that, is this is like iconize. This is an analog of iconize, but it is for out-of-core iconize, if you understand what I mean. Because if I have an iconized object, right, and I have something here, if I say iconize range of 100 or something, and I take that object,
yes,
right, it stores in a notebook. But there's no reason why we can't have an analog of iconize that stores not in a notebook, right? In other words, this, as it resolves, could perfectly well do an import. Am I wrong?
Well, it couldn't. I mean, it could parse to an import. It couldn't. Well, it couldn't actually evaluate that import until evaluation occurred.
Fine, that's okay.
Well,
I mean,
in a lot of cases, certainly not in all cases.
It could, in principle, do that as part of preemptive evaluation, but it probably shouldn't.
I don't think there's any way to force that.
Why isn't if it was a dynamic you could force that? But I don't think it's a good idea.
No, but well, right, the dynamic evaluation and main loop evaluation are two completely separate tracks.
Let's not go there. Okay, so it could parse to an import.
Right.
Which is, I think, a correct thing. So, I mean, this would be a, iconize and store out of core. So then all of these things can work the exact same way. They can say if they're out of core, they become an import. So then,
right, which means every time you evaluate this thing, it's going to be another import.
Well, then why don't you use local cache on the import?
How does that help?
Because then it will cache it, so it doesn't have to re-import it. And
no, it doesn't. Local cache caches cloud objects in the local object.
That's correct.
Which has nothing to do with the fact that if we create a little icon that's an import, right, then every copy of that icon is going to be another import.
Well, but if you evaluate any of these, the result will be stored in the kernel, right? It's just a question of where it comes from,
Right, so we don't want to actually use the word import. We want to use some kind of thing that indicates that it is coming, like local cache, right? If we made local cache of import work, then it will hash this thing inside. And if it ever sees that same thing again, it will come from the local cache. Right? I mean, we want an analog of local cache, but for in memory. So it says,
so maybe if we did it as like once of import.
Oh yeah, that would work. That would work. That would work. That would work. That's exactly right. Right. So then, okay. So then what this would do is so this is a reference to a storage location. When it cannot handle out of core, it has to pull it in with a once of import, right? When it can handle out of core, then it can merely be a reference through some.
Well, I think the objects with out of core will have to have their own UI that does this, right? I don't think the general summary box is going to start inspecting.
I agree. Right, I agree. But so then the point is that okay, so this case we can then fix, right? So this case will get fixed. This will not show up here. This will just say store now, and it'll say how do you want to store it. And then this underneath here, when the data isn't in the notebook, but it is stored externally, that should indicate that somehow.
Well, I think. Well, I mean, I guess I don't know, but I would imagine that it would. It would no longer look like a summary box.
Why?
I think it would, because it's not the actual expression. I don't think.
Well,
I don't think something
by the time you get it to this point.
No, it's not. I mean, not if you do convert to
hold on.
standard
The case
form.
Is you had it as a notebook. You store the notebook. The thing wasn't saved in the notebook. What do you still have in the notebook? So what we have right now is basically this summary blob, right? So what it should probably say is instead of data not in notebook store now, it should say data not in notebook load now, because that's the state it's in, right? In other words, in the notebook, right? In the notebook, if you save this thing out, then.
But then what's the purpose of?
Because you have something in your notebook that appears to be this, and when you look at subsequent lines in your notebook that refer to this, everything's happy until you try and re-execute it. When you try and re-execute it, you need to load it. And I mean, it's probably auto load itself if you just shift enter evaluate it, but you should also be able to load on demand.
Well, but I see the point. If it says data is not in notebook, load now, I would assume that this means that it loads it into notebook, but it most definitely will not.
Okay, well, fine. Then
Yeah,
the
I
wording
don't
needs to
think.
be
I
changed.
think that's
The
completely
wording needs to be
wrong.
changed slightly, but basic idea is it either loads it. Okay, so well, data not in session. That sounds a bit wrong. I mean, it's like a you know, Parliament is not in session or something, but you know what I'm saying. Data not in
Right, but yes, but okay, fine. But what will that? I mean, that doesn't do any
Well,
good.
we got to move on. Look. It's pretty obvious what you need to do.
No, it's completely wrong. But can we maybe talk about? Can we maybe talk about the actual storage location?
Yeah, the actual
option?
storage location isn't a good idea as such, because it needs to be unified with these other things, right? So that's why.
No, it's. Okay,
look,
no. Listen, Stephen. Right, you're always complaining about why are things in random locations all over my file system.
Mm-hmm.
We're trying to sort of create a uniform interface to that.
Right, which apparently wasn't unified with the persistence location for some reason.
Why would it be? Persistence location is for expressions, not for files. If I do speech synthesize, to create some WAV file, I want to know where that WAV file is. I don't want it to be in some mysterious part of the file system.
This name is completely wrong. Okay, it's way too general for what this is. What is this? This is a file. What is it? Tell me what it actually is.
Well, no, it's a location where you will restore. Well, it can be a couple of different things, but it's the location. It is a location to store the result of an operation, possibly an out of core operation.
I don't think it's the result. It's the input, isn't it? Here.
No, it's not the
it's
input.
The result.
It's the result.
It
Audio
is the
generator creates a file.
And it doesn't output a file, it outputs a file that is backed by that file.
Well, it outputs an audio expression that contains the file.
Okay, let's go through the different things we need to do. So the first thing we need to do is we need to fix this. Okay.
Okay.
So
well, how about you look at what the agenda that I actually spent an hour preparing?
Okay. Because I found something here that shouldn't have ever happened. Okay, so this is something that needs to get fixed.
All right, we've made a note of that. It'll be sent to the relevant folk.
Well,
and it's not directly related to the item at hand.
All right, so let's bring this back in another meeting, please. We'll bring this particular thing back. Okay. So the issue here is you want a place to store the output of this function. That is, it's cache, basically. It's not really a cache. It's actually the output.
Well, in some cases, it might be a cache, and in some cases, it might be the actual output.
Well, which is it? I mean, is it a cache that can be thrown away? Or does it then, is it, and in the output blob, what does it look like?
Well, you get an audio object or a video object, so it looks the same as audio or video.
But how does it indicate that it isn't really there?
There is a little icon. If you go to the page for audio, there is a small visual difference between in-core, file backed, URL backed. Open the notes, the details. There, the little waveform, the file icon, the link icon.
Okay. And when I roll over this thing, I see it says what the file name is there.
Yes. And the tooltip is going to show the full name.
Okay. So this is when I use audio. No,
this is
not an option when you use audio.
When
Correct.
you generate audio, this can say where you want this file, the generated file, to be.
But in the audio thing itself, there is no such option.
Correct.
But so the input form of an audio is what?
It's audio of file of blah, 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 or audio of URL of blah, 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 or audio of, you know, an array represent.
Okay. So why is this? I don't understand here. So this is because in audio, you're saying it's a directly, if I say audio capture, it'll actually work here, but hello there. Okay. So
Right, now where is that file? Right, and this is something that we were thinking to, this is something that was created in Wolfram documents directory, which maybe now there's some idea to abandon $Wolfram documents directory.
Okay, so you're proposing that this has a way to say where to put it.
Exactly.
So capture. Okay.
Right now there's a method option or something,
okay,
right?
All right, fine. So audio capture to storage location is an absurdly general name for an unbelievably specific thing. What really is this?
Yeah, I think that the problem comes, I mean, first of all, we use storage in external storage for different things. The other thing is that it is a kind of implementation-centric name, which says we store the output somewhere, but for the user, it would be more like result or file location or output location.
Which is both of which are very weird concepts. Why is it an option, by the way? Is there a default for it or what?
There are defaults for them, yeah.
Right, and which are, I think, are currently, well, I think most of the audio and video ones are now reasonably, well, the image ones haven't been unified, but.
No, but okay, but I mean, but is it the case that you want to reset the default storage location in a clean way? Because otherwise, why isn't this just an argument to this function?
Well, for one thing, it might be.
It does become, in one case, either undocumented. We have it as the fourth or fifth argument. Carlo may remember which one.
Yeah, for the example that you see in the usage box video frame map is one where storage location or whatever the name would be useful. At the moment, it's the fourth argument.
Okay,
it looks like it's
for
like
something
fifth.
That could be, yeah, the fifth argument, yeah, for something that could have between 2 and 5 arguments, which is a bit unwieldy.
Okay, all right, okay, that's not going to work. All right. So.
And also the advantage of it being a storage location, of it being an option, is that it can be consistent across a bunch of functions, and you don't have to memorize which position for which function.
All right. What is it? It's the location. What is it?
It's the location where the generated out of core, at least as envisioned here, and I think probably to other things, it's the location where the generated out of core thing will be put, right? So
I think more general, it's the location where the data is stored. It could be in memory, it could be the directory where you create a file, it could be the file itself.
Right, and so and let me point out that, so for example, one of the values we have there is directory.
I saw that.
Yeah, right. And so if you don't like, using documents, you want to use, your foobar directory, but you don't want to have to manually specify a name.
No, I understand, but it automatically chooses between a file and a directory specification here.
Correct.
Or does it have to have a trailing slash or what?
So as the note says right there, if the directory already exists, then you don't have to put the trailing slash. If you're not sure whether the directory exists, put in the slash so it isn't interpreted as a file name.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay.
Which is just a necessary. I mean, that's not pretty, but it's necessary.
Let's see. Yeah. Is this really even a location in the sense that we're using it in other places. I mean, it's somewhat similar to persistence location, right?
It is somewhat similar.
By the way, can somebody report the fact that the default example here has a caret, which is completely crazy?
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah, that's clearly a bad tagging in the main usage box. Although I'm a bit surprised that, well, there must just be some funny box structure in there. Somebody made some bad edit, and there's some invisible box.
All sorts of people are commenting on our live stream that they don't want to have to rewrite their code if they switch between storing a cloud and a local file system. Yeah, that's the idea here, is that you don't have to do that. This is
right, and you could just do set options. Right, so we have.
Except you can't, because if this is the location where it is looking for stuff.
It's not where it's looking for things; it's where it's putting things.
Well, how about something like, is that what it is? Or,
I mean, it's not default, it's just data destination if you want to use that kind of.
Yeah, I'm okay with data destination or result destination. Well, I guess it's not necessarily the result as such, so maybe data is a better name. Plus, it's alliterative, so it's like a superhero.
Could it be something like resource related, or is that confusing?
No.
It's totally confusing. I'd love to have it be even more qualified than this. It needs to be an encrusted name.
Okay. Generated data destination. That's kind of long, but I think it is.
That's a good idea. Yeah. I think that will be okay. Generated data destination.
Okay, I can, Shadi or I can do the rename after the meeting.
Hold on.
I do have one question.
Hold on, I'm just looking.
Okay.
So, I mean, what does the automatic setting do? And by the way, once you've used this generated data destination, the object that comes back, the audio that comes back, then has a burnt-in location, right?
Correct.
Yeah, people on the live stream are confused about the unifying backend file systems. It's not about that. We already have that pretty well under control. They're just different places where you can write things, and it's all pretty well unified. This isn't about that. This is simply about a rather trivial question of when the thing is going to send data to somewhere to tell it where you want it sent. And
exactly.
The question of what we have that, we actually have a pretty well organized set of places you can send it to, and I don't see why, persistence. Did I misspell it? Yes, I did. It should have picked that up. Presumably many of these persistence locations should be allowed as generated data destination, presumably.
Well,
it's a little weird.
Well, I don't think that like kernel or kernel session, whatever it's called, right? There's something which is effectively init.m, right? I don't think that's a good place to store your data.
No, it's not. It's not. However, the local notebook would be an okay place to store it. And that's not something accessible from this syntax.
That is correct, because for some functions, we don't have an in-memory modality.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying a different thing, which is in notebook.
Right. If it's small enough, well, the question is, can we sort of safely actually store that, right? arbitrary binary data, right? I mean, isn't this the whole multi-notebook problem of how do we stick binary blobs into notebooks? I mean, if it's small
Bundles.
enough that you can store it as a normal expression, then sure. But if it's, an MP3 that's backing it up, I don't know that you can necessarily just stick that into a notebook. And sorry for cutting you off, Shadi. I didn't mean to do that.
No, well, this is notebook bundle idea. We've discussed it with John multiple times. I think it would be ideal eventually if we could have notebook bundles with JPEG assets and MP4 assets and so forth.
Yeah, I agree that that's an idea. I have no objection to the idea. I just I feel like waiting for that one is sort of like waiting for Godot. So
Oh yeah, of course, of course.
But okay, syntactically, the way that would work is that it would be refer to a notebook object. Is that right? Although it's a little weird that it will be referring to itself. I'm just worrying about the syntax because you can't do a string that says notebook there. You can't do strings that are like these strings because you're using that for file names.
Right. So there are two possibilities. Either we require the file wrapper both for files and for directories, and then we can have magic strings, or we have allow like notebook as an option value.
Right? Why don't we design defensively here and put file as a wrapper for these?
Okay.
I don't know what's going to happen in the future, but I think this is a fairly obscure thing that most of the time people are going to use the default.
But I think it's going to be very common that people do set options of a function with a directory to get all of their files in one place.
Well, then
in one known place.
Give them a dollar
that's what I was
data destination, so they can set that
and
have that be the default, and it can be automatic if you want, as the default, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Did we get that one?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you want to review it all. I mean, I guess we haven't sort of discussed it all Wolfram document directory in any detail. If we want to sort of keep it or make
it
go
documented right now?
Yes.
Okay, I don't see a problem with it.
Okay.
I mean, it's just where it depends on the operating system what the convention is, right?
Right. It's basically. And I would sort of, there are a few things that are sort of stored in random locations, like chat uses some bizarre product specific location for its chats that should probably move into Wolfram Documents directory and just be consistent across.
Is there a subdirectory in there? Under Wolfram Documents directory, is there a subdirectory that indicates chats and so on?
Not chats. The only things that go there now are images, audio, and video. So those are the three subfolders.
Right, and I would right now chat uses something like it uses documents directory, then a subdirectory that depends on the particular front end you're using. So it's different for Mathematica or Wolfram Desktop or Finance Platform, and then chat, which just seems crazy. I think we should tell the chat people to just move this into Wolfram Documents directory.
Yeah, but so on as who approves that there should be a list of what the subdirectories of Wolfram Documents directory are that do different things. Who has that list right now?
Well, I guess it's the people in this meeting.
Okay, so can we make that list? Maybe Devin can pull together that list so we can look at it, right?
Okay.
From every group that thinks that they have something that is going to be stored there, what is its subdirectory name?
Okay.
Okay. And we have to decide, is it chats or chat, and how does that work and so on?
Okay. Right now it's right. So right now the list is video, audio, and image, I believe, right?
Okay, so then it will be chat would be except those are partially collective nouns, but not really. So in other words, what it would read is documents directory /audio/ whatever it's called, foo, whatever it is.
Yep.
Right. So then it will be /chat/ that and so on. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just to be clear then, I mean, is that consistent with the way that persistence location works? Okay, what is this local to a computer based on user home directory? We think that's misdocumented and needs to be changed. Is that right, Roman?
I mean, it is explained further down what the exact default is, but
Yeah, okay.
I mean,
Well, I would be curious because I have no idea what that sentence means.
$default local base. It's a local object in $default local base, which is this file here. Right? We looked at that before. $default local base.
That's the standard .wolfram subdirectory, right? That we use for many things.
That's this, which is in the library subdirectory,
on Mac,
opposed to as opposed to the documents directory.
Yes. Was that something you are not supposed to look at yourself, right?
Yes. Which again could be a valid location, which is what's happening with the local object thing here. But the storage location here shouldn't be saying, no, this is wrong. It shouldn't be saying a particular local object. It should just be saying, I just want this thrown in the local object store.
Well, you might want a particular local
You might,
object.
but that's not the primary thing you want. What you want, which is what I suspected, is you want basically some subset of these. Like you want to say local, which means it's just going to be thrown in a local object. Cloud, it's going to be thrown in a cloud object. And that it is going to record in the output from this function, it is going to record what, which cloud object. So I think the correct thing is that the strings correspond to the persistence location strings, and obviously cookie managed isn't a generated data destination. But local certainly is, and cloud certainly is.
I mean, it is kind of the same thing with directory versus file, right? You specify the directory and then it just puts it in an arbitrary named file, or you can specify the file name yourself. Same with local object. You can say, put it somewhere in a local object or use this particular local object.
So generated data directory, generated data destination.
Yes.
Then could be a string like local that just means throw it in, the local object store.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or
still...
in a very rare case, it would be a specific local object.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It would be nice to support both modalities.
It's not a problem, so long as we don't have. Okay. All right, so let's try, and then what's happening here that means that to get it in this location, in the library location, you're just saying local, generated data destination arrow local.
I mean, to be fair, you could not do it that easily as well if you said local object with no arguments. That would create an unnamed
don't care.
object. Okay, fine.
Don't care.
Right, but then if you wanted that as the default, you'd have to use it make it as a delayed value, which is not a problem for us, but it's probably not something we want to force an arbitrary.
So I think we've got a design here. All right, let's go take a look at our last item on the agenda for a moment.
Yeah, didn't we discuss this last time? I feel like we did, but Ian and Jose should take the lead on this.
Yes. We did discuss this. Is this not finished?
I think that the conclusion was so Devin put it there. So
Devin should speak up. What is?
Was there something left? Go.
I think we discussed this. So the idea was that we will have this option in echo timing, and we need to decide whether to put it somewhere else, like in repeated timing.
But by the way, Brian on our live stream is talking about notebook bundles, which we agree with. This is what various people have been talking about, is how to get something which is and that's something maybe we can talk about for just a second here. Okay, you want to send somebody over the complete bundle of stuff that they need to run this notebook and its various attendant pieces. What do you send them? Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
What do you send them? Because you can't send them the storage locations, right? The only storage location that's going to work for that is something relative to the file location of the notebook. See what I'm saying? If you send them a zip bundle, the only thing that they can do where they will be able to unpack it and have that bundle work is for the sub-elements, the data elements in the bundle to have relative values, have locations relative to the notebook, right? You can't have them go off in some random directory somewhere because there's no guarantee they even have write permission on that. And it's obviously not the right thing to do. So the only way that definitely works is if you threw it in a public cloud location, and the destination, the user who receives the notebook is simply themselves downloading from the public cloud. But that assumes that you're prepared to expose or get the permissions right for the user you're sending it to. It requires that you know what user you're sending it to. It doesn't allow you to have something where you just say, here's the blob of stuff. Does that make sense? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So what should we do about this? Maybe Shadi, Carlo, you're...
One thing that has in practice worked for us very nicely is OwnCloud. Dropbox-like sharing, that you share a whole folder or a whole folder
Well,
structure.
I know that, but I mean, but how you get the folder transported is a secondary issue. The primary issue is that we don't currently have, in the way the notebook is set up, it does not live in a sort of flotilla of other files, right? The notebook is just on its own. But the point I'm making is the only way this can work is if what we could do is to have something where, which I think is very weird, but it's sort of reminiscent of the way the web works and the way a bunch of other things work, a directory, which is really the notebook directory. And if you, in a sense, conceptually sort of open that directory, what you get, analogous to index.html, is the notebook opens, but it has its, flotilla of support files sitting around in that directory. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I mean, we do that manually by using relative paths, right? Yes.
Inside the notebook, that then has relative paths. See what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But the point is that what you've proposed doesn't support that.
No.
Right? So that's not going to work, right? Because this,
Well,
it's not going to work.
Well, why won't in this imaginary world where we have notebook bundles, why couldn't we have a value?
No. So here, the right way to do this is...
Right. Why can't you do notebook directory bracket as your directory, right? Then they'll be right next to your current notebook.
Yes, I understand. Although they'll be sprayed as garbage into that directory.
Yeah, and the references would still be the absolute path name, right?
That's another thing that we will have to look into it and make sure audio video do not resolve into absolute paths. Maybe we can leave them as relative paths.
Well, but we already support relative paths, but they are relative paths compared to
directory.
The current directory, not compared to the notebook.
So I'm not sure we can have two different.
But you need a way to indicate that a file, which we have partially, but we don't have a particularly clean version of it, that a way to refer to a file, given a name of a file, foo/bar, saying that is notebook relative, that file name is notebook relative.
Right. The front end has a way of doing it, right? It's front end backtick file name. And then you give it a list of elements, and so you can root it at, right? And it doesn't, right? The whole point is that unlike our file functions, it doesn't evaluate, and so it remains a list of things, and so you can root it at the current notebook directory, at the $installation directory, whatever. I'm not sure. Well, it sounds like what you're saying is we need a version of that for system, which is fine, but it sort of coming. I think the hard parts will be coming up with a good name and documenting it clearly versus the other file type functions we have.
Right. Well, I mean, notebook relative file.
Right, but why limit it to notebook?
What else would you have?
You know, dollar installation directory, dollar base directory, user base directory.
All right. So maybe it's just relative file.
Mm-hmm.
So in other words, that would be, so then what you'd say is relative file. But I don't know when it knows to default to the notebook as opposed to, so, you know, it'd be relative file foo, whatever it is, dot, you know, wave or something, comma, and then it would be, well, it's a little bit complicated, isn't it? Because it doesn't want to say notebook, doesn't want to have the notebook object because that's not persistent.
It could just be string notebook, right?
Well, if it used the persistence locations, if it used that same family of persistence locations, yes.
The crucial thing would be then to save this in the input form of
right,
objects,
except
like audio and video.
Well,
rather
I
than
mean,
resolving it.
Well, I mean, I don't think this is particularly useful, right? I mean, I think you want it either to perhaps be held, and you know, then you can use dollar variables to describe the root, or you'll need a way to sort of represent, you know, each.
This is what we need, right? Because this is the thing that says if it is referenced in a particular, if the audio object references a file, it references a relative file that is relative to whatever directory, which may be completely different from the kernel's current working directory, whatever directory the notebook is in.
Well, yeah, but you're obsessed with notebook, and I'm saying I often need things which are not relative to the notebook.
What else would it be relative to?
I told you, dollar home directory, dollar installation directory, dollar base
but
directory.
Those are not stored. The point is that the things that are in the notebook are what is stored. That's the confusing thing, that there is this object that is stored somewhere, right? It is part of the notebook that is being stored. And that it has to call out and get something that is as if it was in the notebook bundle. I'm saying that's what this is doing.
I just think that is too small a problem to solve.
But I don't think so. I think that's a critical problem to solve, because that's the exact problem that everybody's referring to. How do you send a bundle of files that can be rehydrated and work with the notebook that you have? That's the problem being solved. Now, the other case you're talking about, which is I send something which is going to be rehydrated in a home directory, right? What is the thing that you're dealing with in that home directory? That is relative to the current working directory, and it's not relative to this thing that doesn't really have a directory, that is this free-floating notebook. The notebook implicitly defines a directory by virtue of where it's put. Whereas in the case of the home directory thing, unless I'm missing something, I don't think that same issue arises.
My home directory is different on different computers. So if I want to set something up relative to home directory, I need to, you know, a way that doesn't burn in the value of dollar home directory.
Well, it's / whatever, isn't it?
Okay, fine. But right. But there may be other things. Right. But tell the slash is an
it's
absolute.
fine. I don't disagree that the relative file is a fine thing to have for that case. But the important case we're dealing with right now, and the case that isn't well specified by anything at evaluation time, is this, well,
yes, it is. It's called notebook directory.
You can get it at evaluation time, although it's calling the front end to get that data.
Well, and what else could it possibly do?
I understand, but my point is that it's a different situation from the situation in which you're purely doing kernel operations. It's because there is this file that is known to the front end that is implicitly defining a location.
And I think the main point here is that these relative files would be generated as output. And so that it doesn't instantiate it as an absolute path name. I think that's the main difference.
That already, oh look, he contributed it, his very self. Notebook relative path. Yeah. Relevant.
Yeah, and
Right.
as I said, the main issue here is that the functions that rely on these out-of-core assets need to preserve the held form of notebook relative path, because if not, it does nothing.
Project template.
Well,
Interesting.
it's actually not necessary, because if you evaluate that resource function at the beginning of your notebook, and then you can access everything with the resulting absolute path within the same session.
Yeah, but if you then save the notebook, pass it to some other person.
Yeah, it will still work.
Okay.
Yes.
Hold
Yeah,
on,
but
hold
if you say audio of notebook relative path, for example, that will burn the absolute path in the notebook. And if that's what you want to retrieve,
Okay.
an output cell that has been burned in, that has the
Yeah, that's not
absolute
what you
path,
want.
that will
It
be
wants
broken.
to be lazy.
Yeah,
Mhm.
this is what I'm saying. It needs to be preserved in the output form of whatever consumes it.
Right. Okay, listen, I think we should have a separate discussion about working towards notebook bundles and the way that that should basically work. And it relates a little bit to the Packlet system, which has already solved part of this problem, right? I mean, it just puts things in a directory and has a Packlet info file that explains what all of them are. Does that make sense to people?
Yep.
Okay, so the junior version of that is to just have a bunch of things in a directory with things correctly referenced. And presumably the Packlet system could also use this relative file mechanism. But the Packlet system has this whole, much more advanced mechanism for just throwing things in a directory and then having a separate file that contains the meta information about what goes where or what the meaning of these different things is. Okay, so let's bring back this issue another time. And, for what we're talking about here, I mean, this is the general direction that we should be going in. We've got much of it specified, but there's a little bit more to go. But for another time, the concept of this other concept. Okay. Anything else for right now?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you particularly to people on the live stream for a lot of very useful comments. Much appreciated. And thanks to the